Hello, everybody. Welcome to welcome to Training Future Technologists, Building Pathways for the Future through FIRST Robotics. My name is Melissa B. Bube. I use both they, them, theirs, and she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm a Senior Engineering Outreach Director at Inmar Intelligence. As far as what I'm going to be covering today, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping items in my welcome section. I'm going to spend a little bit of time reviewing talent pool needs. Then I'm going to start really digging into what FIRST Robotics is for those who aren't already familiar with that program, and then dig into building technologists with FIRST Robotics, how this is a really effective program for that, and how that is really helpful for paving pathways to technology careers for these young people. Then I'll touch on bringing new technologists into the workforce, which hopefully will be a part that we can have some good conversations around, and then bring it to a Q&A. I believe that what we'd like to do is save Q&A to the end, since we're doing this in a remote kind of setting, so that hopefully we can make sure that everyone's questions get heard and everyone gets a chance to get answers to their questions. So welcome, everybody. I really appreciate everyone who has come in at this time in the morning, especially if anyone's calling in from earlier time zones than the Eastern time zone. I'm going to touch on a number of things during this talk. I'm really thinking about ways that we can widen and deepen the technology talent pool, particularly through the lens of utilizing FIRST Robotics as a program. And I will note that while FIRST Robotics as an organization is international, I will largely be looking at this through a US-based lens, a US-focused lens, because that's my personal experience, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about, both from a technology career perspective and in an experience with FIRST Robotics perspective. I'll be touching on things that people can be doing as individuals to help with paving these pathways and bringing these individuals into technology careers. And I'll also be touching on things that people can be doing at an organizational level, whether that's from a support perspective or a policy perspective. So let's go ahead and dive in. First, we're going to touch on that kind of what the talent pool looks like today and why this is kind of a quote unquote problem to be solved. And to me, it feels a little self-evident just because of being inundated in it, but I wanted to make sure that we touched on some of these pieces first to kind of set the stage for everybody. So I'm not going to read through every single one of these quotes, but I wanted to represent kind of how the problems that we're seeing are leading to outcomes that we don't want. So even prior to the pandemic, but definitely even now today, we're seeing a talent shortage in the technology labor market. And that is causing outcomes like leading to an adoption barrier to emerging technologies, whether that's costing our organization, our various organizations, millions of dollars in lost productivity. We're finding that getting individuals and bringing them in and keeping that talent from a technology talent perspective is very difficult. And we see that the number of technology sector jobs that remain unfilled continues to climb, and COVID-19 has created more urgency around that kind of digital transformation need. An example from a North Carolina perspective, because North Carolina is where I am based out of, is how open tech job listings continue to go up year over year. For June of 2022, open tech job postings were up 40% compared to June 2021. And if we look at this from a US perspective, US job postings for June 2022 were up 44% year over year for a total of 1.7 million job postings in the tech industry. We have seen that one of the contributing factors to this shortage of tech talent is a lack of talent pool diversity. The US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has done some studies on diversity in high tech compared to the overall private sector. And what we see is that employees who are male and white are overrepresented in the tech or high tech industries, as well as Asian Americans to a certain extent. But we see that African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and females are very underrepresented in the high tech sector compared to the overall private sector. And the more that we can start to bring in folks who are in these underrepresented areas, the more that we can, again, increase that talent pool to help feed into the roles that we have sitting open. So I'm going to move on from that kind of foundational piece and talk a little bit about what FIRST Robotics is. So I can kind of see into the room, could people raise their hands if they already have a level of familiarity with FIRST Robotics? Okay, I see like maybe 1 or 2 hands. So this may be a review for you, but hopefully this is something that'll give other people a picture of what FIRST Robotics is, since that's going to be a big chunk of what I'm going to be talking about today. So FIRST stands for Inspiration and Recognition in Science and Technology. As I previously mentioned, this is an international program, and its mission centers around inspiring young people to be leaders and innovators in science and technology. So they do that in a number of ways. They really help with building technical skills, but also with building soft skills and leadership skills that help them as they move into the workforce. They do that partially from a philosophical perspective by pushing forward these ideas of what they call gracious professionalism and cooperation, which is a hybridization between cooperation and competition that helps these students partially build their skills by competing in a very constructive way that helps everyone achieve their absolute best. FIRST as a program has 3 different areas and reaches from preschool all the way through the end of high school. FIRST Lego League is that kind of preschool to middle school level. It is divided up into 3 different programs. There's FIRST Lego League Discover, which introduces these younger students to certain engineering thinking patterns, problem solving, and critical thinking without diving too deeply into the technical realm on the mechanical or the programming side. It moves into FIRST Lego League Discover, which is still very structured in how the students are instructed, but already starts giving them an opportunity to work with Lego technologies, to work with various motors, as well as block programming. And then at the FIRST Lego League Challenge level, for folks who have been familiar with FIRST as a program, this is the main FIRST Lego League level that has existed for the longest amount of time. And you may or may not have seen like these large tables that have mats on them that whether a Lego EV3 or nowadays a Lego Spike Prime robot can navigate on. That is the FIRST Lego League Challenge level of the program and moves into kind of the middle school age group. Overlapping with that, but extending into high school, is FIRST Tech Challenge. This is a scale up in size as well as complexity in what the students are learning. Their robots start out in a maximum 18-inch by 18-inch by 18-inch configuration. And instead of working individually on a mat or a field, they're on a larger field with up to 4 robots at a time in an alliance of 2 robots versus 2 robots. And they have an actual competitive game that they compete in to learn some of these technical skills, and they're building these robots over time. They also, while still retaining a block coding option, are usually coding in Java and actively deploying that code to the robot and building a lot of those skills. At the first robotics competition level, this is largely focused on high school. This is what some people might call the varsity level of first robotics. And these robots, depending on the requirements or what's allowed during the challenges every year in that particular game, may be up to 6 feet tall. And they're competing on a field that is more like a tennis court size field. And they have 6 robots on the field at a time in alliances of 3 versus 3. So like I said, we have first LEGO League, we have first Tech Challenge, and we have first robotics competition. And I may refer to them as FLL instead of first LEGO League, FTC instead of first Tech Challenge, and FRC instead of first robotics competition, but I'll try to be mindful of speaking out the whole phrase instead of the abbreviation, since not everyone is as familiar with these programs. So that is a very basic overview of just what this program is as it exists. Every year, regardless of the level that the students are at, there's going to be a new theme. It will either be the theme of what a specific curriculum is built toward. That's like what we see in First LEGO League Discover and First LEGO League Explore. It may be the theme that speaks to the nature of the game that is being played, from the first LEGO League Challenge level all the way up through the first robotics competition level. Those are kind of staggered throughout the year depending on the level of the program. And students who are in those overlap ranges between the programs may participate in multiple teams. So I've been the coach for a number of years for our first robotics competition team called Girls on Fire. And we have a number of participants on our team who also participate in First Tech Challenge as part of some of their schoolwork. And they have the ability to participate in both levels of the program and get benefit from those different things from the different levels. So I've talked kind of obliquely about the skills that these students are able to build and the technologies that they're using in First Robotics. So I want to take a step back and think about how we're building technologists with this program, First Robotics. One of the things that I didn't mention when I was introducing First Robotics and what it is was the founder of First Robotics. So the founder is Dean Kamen. And for folks who aren't familiar with Dean Kamen, he's the inventor of the Segway, and he has also invented a number of things that fit into the medical space and some innovations there. And one of the quotes from him with regard to First Robotics is that we're not using kids to build robots, we're using robots to build kids. And this fits into that philosophy again of how do we make this, or how do we utilize a program that makes it both like fun and engaging for these students to learn these skills, and then take those skills and apply them in a way that will be really effective to bring them into technology careers and ideally future technology leaders. So what kind of skills are they building as they go through these programs? Let's touch on some of the programming skills that they utilize throughout the program. As I mentioned, the really, really early levels of First LEGO League, the students are not actually utilizing code. So in that First LEGO League Discover level. Once they get to First LEGO League Explore, they do have access to start learning about block coding in a very, very linear fashion. They're using Lego WeDos or Lego Spike Essentials. And they're usually following very explicit instructions, And then they can iterate off of that if there's something that they want to do that they find exciting there. This usually is very simplistic. They have a small number of one, maybe two motors that they're working with. They can cause that motor to behave in ways that they imagine for the particular theme. This past season was very focused on transportation logistics and warehouses. And so the students were doing things like building out of Legos a device that can sort cargo, and they would create a program that could move the motor back and forth to sort the cargo in different directions. This is at a very basic level where in the program itself, they can't make a lot of choices or have flow control. And so they would create individual programs to sort one way versus another way. Once they get to the first Lego League Challenge level, the code becomes much more complex, even though it's still Lego block coding. At this point, they've progressed to the Lego Spike Prime, or what in the past has been Lego EV3. So both on the mechanical side and on the programming side, things allow for more complexity and more unique problem solving and critical thinking opportunities. At the first tech challenge level, there's still the opportunity for students to utilize block coding if that makes sense for either the level that they're at or the comfort that they have with programming. But this is the level at which they start having the opportunity to program with Java. For the first tech challenge robots, they're essentially controlled with either Android phones or devices that are running Android that aren't necessarily phones, that are purpose-made for running these robots. And so they'll utilize Android Studio and write Java code and push that code to their robots and then control their robots from another device. So that's the level that they're learning programming at the first tech challenge level. They can get quite advanced at this level, which is why it extends into high school, just like first robotics competition. It's more the physical size of the robots that is scaled smaller at this point. They can get really as complex as they would like to get at the programming level within the restrictions that they have in terms of the number of motors that they're allowed to have on the robot, as well as weight and other restrictions. At the first robotics competition level, there still is retention of block coding as an option, but it is in a form that is going to be applicable in the workforce. LabVIEW in this case is utilized in agriculture and sometimes in warehouse and assembly line types of situations from a robotics perspective. They can also utilize either C++ or Java. Our team utilizes Java. That's for a couple of different reasons. One is that we felt like for our students' areas of interest at the time when we started the team and the expertise of our mentors leaned more towards Java being a good fit for our students. But the fact that there are a variety of options for these students available is really helpful, both from a learning perspective and from an application perspective outside of the program. So diving in a little more deeply on First Lego League and moving out beyond just programming skills, I mentioned these 3 different levels of discover, explore, and challenge. We're getting into some of the slides where there's some dense information. I'm not planning to read out every small specific little piece of the information on these slides. We can always come back to them if people have questions about them in the Q&A. And I do plan to make sure that these slides are available for folks to peruse on their own time. And I tried to ensure that in all of these kind of complex flow charts, that all of that information is available in text and not just embedded in an image. So if anyone is going to be viewing these at a later time with a screen reader or other similar technology, they should have access to all of that information. But I'm also happy to provide additional information if there's anything that folks felt like they couldn't get access to. So with First Lego League, there are definitely various levels of the skills that these students are building. And one of the things that the designers of the program were really thinking about is how these skills that someone who's 8 years old may be utilizing will eventually flow into skills that they can either get certifications in or will somehow be able to apply in the workforce. So when they're thinking about designing the challenge every year from an engineering perspective or computer science or robotics, or even just the research and communication piece, they're also thinking about eventually how that could apply to careers, whether it's someone getting a project management certification, or whether from a coding perspective, they're working in a Microsoft stack or thinking about cloud computing, whether AWS or in another realm. There's a lot of focus on providing opportunities for the students from a design perspective. And so that definitely feeds into CAD or computer aided design in a number of ways. And then there are always aspects of these teams, as well as the program itself, that have a business flavor to them, whether that's from a technical leadership perspective or whether that's from a adjacent to technical, but focusing on organization or communication or some of these more business-oriented pieces. And some of that could even move into the realm of finance, which happens a little more at the higher levels versus the First Lego League level. So this is a particular slide that I'm definitely not going to read out every piece of it, but it's meant to reflect for 8th grade through 12th grade, which will kind of be a mix of First Tech Challenge or FTC and First Robotics Competition or FRC, what types of skills that these students are building and what kind of course pathways they can start thinking about, which lead into the industry, whether that's through certifications or through actual roles that they're taking on. So a lot of times there's this level of introduction that people have, whether that's classes for introduction to engineering principles, whether that's a student participating in their rookie year or their first year in First Robotics in FRC or FTC, or at the First Tech Challenge level, there is some more stringent curriculum that students can go through to build some of these basic engineering skills. Most teams, particularly when they reach a certain size, divide up the students' responsibilities into a variety of roles. That can be on the mechanical and electrical side, it may be programming, it may be design focused, it may be business and marketing focused. These are usually the 4 areas that teams tend to split out into, and they may have various sub areas depending on the size and focus of the team. We know that from our experience with the First Robotics Competition team, Girls on Fire, that we've definitely had students who have been in our mechanical and electrical roles and have moved on in the team to be leads in those areas and have gone on in college to major in mechatronics and really pursue that in their college careers and beyond. But we've also seen there be some permeable membranes, I guess, between these different areas where we've had students come in and say, you know, this whole environment and these competitions seem really cool and fun, but I just don't feel comfortable with touching the robot, or really like programming just seems very intimidating. So what I would really like to do is focus on the media and marketing piece of things. I'm happy to write essays. I'm happy to help make videos to really showcase what we're doing in the community and things like that. And that's excellent in and of itself. What has been really exciting for me is also seeing when students come in with that kind of mindset, get exposure to these other aspects of working with the robot and working as a team, and choose to explore some of these different areas and maybe find that that's a passion for them. We've had people start in media and marketing and go the mechanical route or go the programming route and become leads on our teams in those areas and then take those skills on to their college careers. So I find that really exciting personally. And I know that I've been able to really observe what the students on our team and on other teams have really been able to develop. And I know that based on not just their level of technical skills, but also how they communicate about what they're working on and how they follow various processes to get to the best possible product in the time that they have and in the constraints that they have. These start to really be the skills that excite me to bring on to, like, I would hope to have as part of my own teams at my organization. So I've touched a lot on technical skills. I wanted to also just briefly touch on some of these other soft skills, whether from a communication perspective or a leadership perspective, talking about collaboration, adaptability, etc. FIRST tries really hard to do studies and identify whether we're actually being effective at improving the skills that the students have and adjusting from where they come in. So we see that over 90 and up to 95% of students have reported gains in skill areas like communication, conflict resolution, time management, and problem solving, which are all very helpful both from a school perspective to help them continue with their education, as well as they come into the workforce to apply in the workforce as well. Part of how they're developing some of these workforce skills is because industry professionals will often act as coaches and mentors on these teams. There are organizations who will provide regionally based internships and apprenticeships. We particularly see this in the aerospace industry when we're talking about like Florida and Texas. We see this in the automotive industry in Michigan in particular, but this will vary a lot depending on opportunities that are in the physical regions that these students are participating in the program in. There are some programs that allow for students to use their experience towards work-based learning credits. We already touched a little bit on potentials for industry certifications and credentials. I personally have seen a lot of involvement from IEEE, trying to ensure that they have made connections with students along the way to bring them into the electrical engineering realm. There are definitely a lot of opportunities for career exploration that organizations will often offer students, and that tends to pique these students' interest in those areas because they've had that opportunity to explore it. Another thing that I did want to touch on, because we are talking about kind of a long-term approach to working with students in a FIRST robotics competition or other FIRST robotics programs, and then over years bringing them into technology careers, is that students will really benefit from being prepared for jobs that don't even exist yet, that we may not even be able to imagine right now. But we know that there is going to be innovation in technology that we will want people to be able to be diving into and quickly become experts on. And one of the things that I really love about FIRST Robotics is that it really teaches these students to be able to learn. And I know for myself as an engineer that learning how to learn is something that has been very effective for me in helping me perform in my career and give back to my organization. So I mentioned longitudinal studies that FIRST has done. They've partnered with Brandeis University and have conducted multi-year studies on STEM-related impacts on FIRST robotics students. And I want to touch on these because I really want to emphasize that the skills are there coming out of this program, but also the interest is there from this program going into these various areas of study and application. And just to give you a little background on how this longitudinal study was set up, they included over 800 students from the first program and over 450 comparison group students. The comparison group included students who did not participate in first programs, but were enrolled in the same science and math classes that the first students were enrolled in school. And students received an initial baseline survey and follow-up surveys every year. This has taken place over the course of 7 years, and overall, 74% of the students remained in the study throughout that entire period. So coming out of that study, what they've seen is that 81% of first alumni declare a STEM major versus 58% of the comparison group. So we definitely see an interest level there from both groups, particularly considering that they're taking these similar classes. But we do see a higher percentage from that first alumni group. When we're focusing in on engineering and computer science majors in particular, we do see kind of a more striking difference here, where we have the first alumni declaring those types of majors at 68%, where only 29% of the comparison group have declared those engineering or computer science majors. Looking at the first alumni group as a whole, over 75% of first alumni are in a STEM field, whether as a student or as a professional. And we definitely see these students growing their entrepreneurship skills as well. One of the founders of Casper Mattress, for example, is a first alum. When I was setting out what the tech talent pool problem was at the beginning of this presentation, I did touch on diversity to a certain extent. And that is one thing that they've been looking at in the longitudinal study for FIRST as well. They have asserted that positive impacts are evident for all FIRST students, regardless of race, gender, income, or community type. And I wanted to pull young women out as an example, partially because that's the focus of the team that I'm involved with, is ensuring that young women, who are a group that have been traditionally underrepresented in STEM, have a focused opportunity to really experience that and build those skills. And we see that young women in FIRST have significant gains in all STEM areas. And when we say all STEM areas, that includes interest in STEM, career interest in STEM, actually being active in STEM, having knowledge, and including that in their identity compared to young women in the comparison group. Specifically, in the case of declaring a major in engineering or computer science, 51% of female FIRST alumni declared that type of major versus only 16% of members of the comparison group. So that makes me really, really excited for the future of the field and seeing all of the people who might be coming into this field who previously maybe wouldn't have been involved. The FIRST program not only helps these students build these skills, build this interest, and get excited about moving into these majors and these careers, it also helps connect them with ways to ensure that they're able to pursue those education opportunities. Through the FIRST program, various organizations and entities provide over $80 million of scholarship opportunities that help allow these students to either go into technical programs and professional programs or go into educational programs and various college degree programs so that they can continue that learning and move into the workforce. So to kind of recap what I've been wanting to touch on with regard to FIRST Robotics as a program and why this is a really unique way for these students to enter into pathways to technology careers. They're already utilizing these tools these skills and these processes that are applicable to the workforce. They're utilizing IDEs like Visual Studio Code and Android Studio and applying them to not just create the code, but push that code to their robots and go through processes where they're creating, testing, and then iterating on what they've found. They're using languages like Java, C++, and LabVIEW. I was just talking about that whole life cycle. The development life cycle that these teams utilize, and it will vary from team to team, but in my experience, it really mirrors Agile methodology to a large extent because they're presented with a problem that has financial constraints, it has time constraints, it has material constraints. They will identify what would constitute a minimum viable product for what they're doing so that they could compete at all. And they work towards that MVP, usually by taking mechanical pieces, design pieces, programming pieces separately and working on those in parallel and then coming together as a team, cycling through testing those things and readdressing them, prototyping pieces to add on to the robot, and continuing to iterate and improve all the way through their competitions, seeing how their robot actually acts in production or at competition, and continuing to improve as they progress through various competition levels. They're utilizing technical collaboration tools, whether that's GitHub and Trello, or whether it's online CAD programs like Onshape so that they can continue to collaborate while they're doing their technical work. So I really want to emphasize not only the skills are being built, the interest is being built, the mindset is being built. And another thing that I really love and why I use the term pathways versus using a term like pipeline is that this whole program is permeable at every level so that even if someone wasn't participating in preschool, they could be entering at the elementary school level or the middle school level or the high school level and really get a great benefit out of the program and still be building these skills along the way, as well as this excitement to move into technology careers. So let's talk about actually bringing these new technologists into the workforce. As I said at the beginning, I'll touch on what people can be doing at an individual level, as well as what organizations can be doing at an organizational level and kind of where those things overlap. I am also going to wrap up with touching on additional things that people can be doing that aren't inherently necessarily tied to FIRST Robotics, and I'll get to that at the very end. So from an individual perspective, what can you be doing to be making these connections with FIRST Robotics students so that they will have interest to move into technical careers and into maybe particularly your organization? You can volunteer at robotics events. There are events at a local, district, or regional and world championship level. Thus far, World Championship has always taken place in the United States. And so that is something that could be within the realm of what people are able to assist with. You can participate as a volunteer as a judge. That's something that can be really particularly exciting because you get a really firm view of the outcomes that the students have brought forward and how they're able to communicate and how they have connected with other members of their team, as well as members of other teams that they're competing with as well. As a judge, usually at events, they will introduce all the judges as they present the awards and also at the beginning of the event. So it's an opportunity for you to get the name of your organization out there. And in my experience, the more these students hear the names of these organizations, the more they associate them with the fun that they've had in FIRST Robotics and the things that they've learned. And so they associate them with places that they could potentially go as they move into the workforce. There are a wide variety of ways to assist with these events that aren't necessarily judging. It can be as simple as handing out safety glasses when students and adults are entering areas that would otherwise be unsafe, doing things like crowd control to ensure that everyone at the event is behaving in ways that the venue would allow. Can be something physically intensive, like setting up and tearing down these large fields and doing field resets in between matches. Most of these events are at venues that have particular security requirements, so you can help with checking people in, doing bag check. You can do things that are much more on the technical side, like helping with safety inspections, as well as readiness inspections to make sure that the robots pass what is appropriate. If you're a very gregarious person and you love sports and you really have learned about that game for that year and are excited about it, you could volunteer as a commentator and be able to like get on the mic during matches and announce to everyone what's going on with all the robots that are on the field. If it's applicable with what your organization is doing, you could also volunteer as a representative of your organization. And I can get into a little bit more details about that when I talk about what organizations can be doing. So that's kind of at the event level, what you can be doing as an individual. You can also be working with these team members as an individual at the team level. It can be as simple as donating funds to teams. You can be volunteering with and mentoring teams. So when you're volunteering with and mentoring teams, that level of time investment and energy investment can vary pretty widely. A lot of teams will meet every day. Some teams will meet less frequently than that. And if they have a technical mentor who comes in, they may be effectively like on call. Maybe they would be messaged via Slack or other messaging service to say like, hey, our students ran into a brick wall with this particular approach. Can you help them solve that problem? Or you could be involved on a more regular basis with being there at all of the team's meetings. You can always help with starting new teams. I know that that's how I initially got involved with First Robotics, is like my current manager, Melissa Whitner, who's our Senior Vice President of Software Engineering at Inmar Intelligence, had actually volunteered as a judge at one of these events and had gotten really excited about how incredible the program is, and had been encouraged by the folks at First North Carolina to partner with our local Girl Scouts organization to see how we could find ways to bring more young women into the program, because particularly at the time, not only in STEM education in North Carolina were young women underrepresented, but in the First Robotics program in general, they were as well. So we decided to found a girl-focused team, which has become Girls on Fire. And I was really lucky to be involved from that early state. And depending on your interest and what you would like to have as a level of involvement, you can help with the beginning of a team and let it kind of have its own life from there, or you can continue that mentor involvement with that team. I had mentioned that when we first founded the team, we had a partnership with the local Girl Scouts. That's something that the Girl Scouts kind of helped us get started, and then they kind of let us continue on our way. Those are things that you can be doing as an individual as well if you want to just kind of help some of these teams get started and then have their own life. If you don't necessarily have the time or the bandwidth to be able to really be dedicating a lot of time to these teams, I highly encourage you to find one of these events, to just attend and to cheer for the teams and to experience it for yourself. You're not necessarily going to be getting your organization out there as heavily, but it is a great way to like still start plugging in with the community that is kind of a low engagement need. And it's always really, really fun at these events. At an organization level, let's talk about events again. You can always encourage your employees to do some of those individual things like volunteering as judges or in other roles at these events. One of the things that I had touched on briefly earlier, and that I've seen organizations do at events is have a recruiting table that's representing your organization. And you can do this at some of the events that are local to your community or within your state or region at a district or regional level, or even potentially at World Championship. But I've definitely seen organizations like John Deere, various branches of the US military. I had mentioned IEEE, they definitely have a presence there as well. And then we have organizations that are sponsoring the entire season, like Boeing and Qualcomm, that will also often have representation at these events, in addition to smaller local organizations who have their tables at events because these students are swarming around and doing their competition. They will often be able to stop by, whether it's for your organization swag that they're passing out, or whether it's because they want to learn more about opportunities that are available from those organizations, whether they're internship opportunities, whether they're scholarship opportunities, or whatever the case may be. Another thing that organizations can do is host events. And that can be really great. If you have a lot of space, you could even host something as intensive as a competition. At Inmar Intelligence, we've hosted a number of kickoff events, which is always really exciting. They do a live stream kickoff every year for a new season of whatever level of the program. And people get together as a large group of teams to see that live stream event and then collaborate together and get really excited about whatever the new challenge is. I've also seen a lot of organizations host learning opportunities for skills like Java programming and CAD. And again, these are all ways that people in the program start to become familiar with these organizations and have interest in being involved in those organizations long term. In terms of involvement with teams, sure, you can be donating funds. That's always great. Like I know that with Girls on Fire, on our banners in our pits and on our t-shirts, we tend to have the logos of organizations that support us. You can encourage your employees to volunteer with these teams. You can help start these teams. You can host them, again, if you have space, as these teams are either brainstorming and working on some of their non-technical pieces, or if you have space that it would be available and appropriate for them to work on some of the machining work that they're doing, or even practicing with the robot. That's always very helpful. If your organization is an organization that provides scholarship opportunities, this is an absolutely excellent place to focus those. And again, definitely providing internship and or full-time role opportunities to alumni is a really, really excellent way to directly be bringing them into your workforce. I want to touch very quickly on resources that are available. I'm trying to include them all here, but definitely, again, feel free to reach out to me if you find that there's something that you're looking for that I didn't necessarily share. There's the official FIRST site, which is at firstinspires.org. The FIRST organization and most of the subsidiary organizations are all 501c3 organizations. So if you are doing any donations to them, and even many individual teams, our team is a 501c3 organization, those are tax deductible donations. You can do volunteer sign up at firstinspires.org/ways-to-help/volunteer. I highly recommend that whatever you do, you check out the team and event search and maybe go to one of these events. For FIRST robotics competition, most of those events are in the kind of March and April timeframe. You can go to firstinspires.org/team-event-search, and you can filter by program. You can search with your zip code to find things that are nearby you and check all of those out. If you're interested in looking at what FIRST is sharing in terms of scholarships that are available to participants in the program, you can go to firstinspires.org/scholarships. So I know we're running a little short on time. Before we open it up for Q&A, I did want to touch on other recommendations for multiple approaches to be bringing people into your technology roles, because realistically speaking, it makes sense to diversify all of the ways in which you're trying to bring people in to help widen and deepen that talent pool. Some of the things that come to mind for me when I think about this are things like return to work programs, which help bring in people who already have built workplace skills, already have technical skills that they've applied. They've taken a break from full-time work, maybe because they're taking care of children or a family member, or other reasons that they may have chosen to step away from full-time work. They're interested in coming back in. Their skills may be a little out of date, but they have already this foundation that people coming in fresh may not actually have already. I know that I've really enjoyed working with organizations like ReachHire, which really facilitate these return to work programs. Another thing that I'm personally very passionate about is accessibility. I know we have multiple sessions about web accessibility during Code on the Beach, and I highly recommend that people go and check those out. But we can think about accessibility at an organizational level as well. Think about supporting people who benefit from an accessible working environment, both with the products that we create and the tools that we utilize internally, and who benefits from those accessible products. We can be accessible enough to ensure that we're a welcoming place for people with disabilities who come in and bring a unique perspective and help us be even more innovative. Very adjacent to accessibility is flexibility. We can bring in new people, but also retain people who might otherwise leave the workforce. Maybe someone was thinking about leaving the workforce and not working full-time because they have kids that they want to be making sure they can take them to school and pick them up from school, etc. And if there's some flexibility with where they can be working from and what hours they can be working, they might be excited about staying in the workforce. With COVID-19 opening up a lot of remote work opportunities that people hadn't been quite as open to previous to that, folks are definitely being tempted by just a wider range of opportunities that are available. And the more flexibility that is being offered at their current workplace, the more apt they are to be retained at that organization. I also think about people who are moving to other locations. They also really benefit from more flexibility in where they can work from. I know a couple of folks personally who wanted to move closer to family, but wanted to continue working for their organization, and the ability to work remotely definitely allowed them to remain in that position. Internal upskilling is also something that I'm very passionate about, because that is how I personally moved into software engineering. I studied public administration in college, and when I was in the workforce, I just wasn't necessarily excited about the idea of going back to school and taking a break from work to spend really focusing on schooling. And I was very fortunate that Inmar offered me the opportunity to build my skills within the workplace. I had already built a lot of just general workplace skills. These folks are already integrated into the company culture. They can easily be acclimatized to the organization's technical focus and really focus them in on the exact skills that you need for the work you're doing. So with that, I know we are running a little short on time. I think we have maybe 6 minutes for Q&A. So I'd like to open it up for any questions if anyone has questions to share.
Yeah, if anyone has questions, we just ask to speak up so that she can hear you, or if you want to come up and speak into the microphone, that'd be easy as well. Questions, anyone? All right, B, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And everyone, thank you for staying for this presentation here.
I really appreciate everybody. Thank you for coming.